Have you ever had a pissed off client? Were there issues on the real or imagined side? And how do you handle those things, right? Dealing with frustrated clients is a part of being a service provider. It's part of being an MSP. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is handling pissed off clients for one reason or another. My name is Adam Hammond. Welcome to Ramblings of a Geek. I've been in the MSP space for the better part of 25 years or so, and I have absolutely seen my fair share of pissed off clients. Some of it was real, some of it was imagined. All of it we had to deal with, so that's what we're talking about today. In fact, one of my former clients who's become a friend of mine used to call me the apologizer in chief, because that was a skill you have to get kind of good at in our world sometimes. So that's what we're talking about today, is frustrated clients. Much like my video about dealing with challenging techs, there's a few different types of frustrated clients that are worth talking about as well, right? The grumpy client, the client that's just kind of frustrated all the time about all the different things. The technically inept client, that client that just isn't very good at dealing with technical stuff. The client that just doesn't pay their bills on time, right? And because they don't pay their bills, they're on credit hold and they get frustrated about those kinds of things. Then you have your once bitten, twice shy client, right? The client that's had a previous bad experience. Now, because I had a bad experience, they're kind of taking it out on you. And then the client who's frustrated for a damn good reason, right? A client that is frustrated because you screwed something up, and that's a thing to deal with, right? So let's go through each of these different clients with some strategies to solve on the way. We'll kick it off with the grumpy client, much like the grumpy tech, right? The grumpy client is the client who is frustrated about all the things all the time. And this might be one person, might be a bunch of people, and it's important for you to understand, right? So let's talk about this grumpy client. First thing I think you should do is figure out the scope of this. Is it one particular user that's frustrated, or is it the whole company? Is the whole company kind of like oriented around just being frustrated about all of the things? Because sometimes that's a culture. Those are some things you want to figure out and understand. Once you figure out the scope is as it relates to who's impacted the client, you can then start trying to solve the problems, right? Fix the fixable is the next piece, right? Fix what you can fix, especially if it's relatively easy. Now, if it's a thing that might take a long time, or a big, ugly issue or whatever, then you might want to communicate some of those things. But ultimately, I find that if you fix the things that can be solved and communicate that well, a grumpy client is going to oftentimes convert to a little bit happier client because of it. So one of the ways that you can kind of get to the bottom of all of this is to have a business review meeting with this grumpy client, right? If you're able to have a business review meeting to understand what's going on, you can get the issues out in the open, you can get who it's impacting out in the open, and you can talk about the fixes all at the same time and kind of move that thing forward, because I think that's a pretty solid way of kind of like just trying to get through the issue. Because if you can get through the issue, you might convert that grumpy client to a raving fan of yours, because that is a thing I have absolutely seen happen in the past. At the end of the day, you might just need to have some thick skin, right? As MSPs, as service providers, as people who work with technology, you're going to deal with frustrated people on a pretty regular basis, and grumpy people are just part of life sometimes. And so it's important for you to have a little bit thicker skin. Now, if a client is belligerent, that's an entirely different issue, right? If you have a belligerent client, that might be a client you need to address that right on the nose and eject them if they're not willing to kind of move in the direction of being away from belligerent, maybe more towards just normal kind of grumpy side of the world. Most clients that are grumpy aren't belligerent, and most clients that are grumpy can get kind of converted away from being grumpy if you can solve some of their challenges. So kind of lean into those kinds of things. Now, ultimately, though, if this just happens to be the culture of your client's company, you might want to think about maybe ejecting them at some point, because if this is going to cause trouble for you ongoing, and this is a thing you're going to have to deal with forever with this client, as you add new clients, maybe let this client go, right? You don't eject them if it's going to really hurt your bottom line and make it so that your business might fail. But like when you are able to eject a client or two, this might be one of the first ones you pick, especially if it's just a single client that's like this. In addition to all this YouTube stuff that I do, I publish a monthly newsletter. In the newsletter, I talk about all kinds of different stuff. The most recent newsletter, which I'll link in the description below, talks all about leadership in your MSP. Go ahead and sign up for the newsletter down below in the description of this video as well. Now, the second client to think about here is the technically inept client, right? This client is the client type that is just not good at technology for whatever reason, right? Maybe it's just them. Maybe it is the vertical that they're in. Maybe it's just a user that's a challenge. But it's important. So again, it's important to suss out kind of where that issue lies. Is it a single user? Is it the whole client? Or is it the whole vertical? Because if it's the whole vertical, you might want to consider whether or not you want to continue doing business in that vertical still. Because if this is a thing you're going to run into over and over and over again, if this is in your core target client profile, you might want to change your target client profile if you don't have the patience for handling these kinds of situations. Because of course this requires lots of patience. It requires lots of patience to deal with people who just don't get technology very well. And it's important to have patience when working with them to not frustrate a client that hopefully is paying their bills on time. Now, when dealing with technically challenged clients, it's important to notice a couple things. The first thing is you probably couldn't do their day job much like they're having trouble with technology. So understand that, because it requires a little bit of grace there. Now, when it comes to kind of trying to solve some of these challenges on an ongoing basis, one of your opportunities happens to be to create some content, create some videos, how-to guides, those kinds of things, to help them help themselves a little bit. Now, if you can create these things in a slightly more generic fashion, it gives you a couple different opportunities. Opportunity number one is allows you to use this with other clients, right? Especially if it's core common things that you deal with on a regular basis, right? That's thing number one. Now, thing number two is that if you're able to create this stuff and put it on your public website as blog posts and other articles of things that will help more than just your clients, it will also help your SEO a little bit. And you may end up signing a new client or two based on just having some good documentation out there and good how-to videos, because that might attract more clients to you as an MSP if you can show that you're patient and that you care about teaching your clients things and you want to be their partner versus just trying to solve technical issues and move on, right? That can really be a benefit to you as well. Ultimately, you need to have the conversation internally to understand whether or not you want to continue working with clients that are technically challenged. If that is not a thing that you just won't ever have the patience for, you should probably call a spade and move on and make sure that you adjust your sales process and your onboarding process to make sure that you aren't bringing on clients that are going to be like that. But ultimately, if you are able to handle these types of clients and handle them well, oftentimes you can create a pretty solid client relationship because you've helped them with more systemic issues within their business. The next type of client that can be a challenge is the always late paying client, right? This is not the client that paid their bill late once. This is a client that is routinely on that 15, 30, 45, 90 day past due type of a thing, right? Those clients can be problematic for your business because cash flow issues are hugely challenging, especially when you are growing your MSP up from scratch. Now, the first thing you should have here is a solid, consistent process to deal with non-paying clients, right? Make sure that you understand what you're going to do at 15 days past due, what you're going to do at 30 days past due, 60 days past due. Like, have these gates along the way, have a process built for that. When you have that process built for that, make sure that all of that stuff, the kind of what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, lives in your contracts, right? When you have a solid contract that tells your client that this is what your late fees are going to be and this is when we're going to shut stuff off and talk about those kinds of things, you put yourself in a much better spot for when things go sideways. Now, ideally, you don't have very many clients that are not paying their bills, because of course that sucks big time. But it's important for you to understand what this process looks like. It's important for them to understand that you have a process for dealing with this and that there is a penalty for not paying you on time. Because ultimately, when one party of the contract doesn't hold up their end of the bargain, the other party doesn't have to hold up their end of the bargain, right? So if they don't pay you, then you don't necessarily have to provide service. Now, I had a conversation with Brad Gross, a year or so ago about this, and I'll link that video above as well. But it's important for you to know what this looks like, handle it appropriately, and know when you can shut things off, know when you can bill them extra late fees and those kinds of things. Now, ultimately, if you have a client that is always on this not paying you list, it might be time to eject them. So you have the language in your contracts, you know what this looks like, you have a process built for it. Well, one of the things you should also think about doing is during your onboarding process and even during your sales process to say, hey, new client, one of the things that we do is we require all of our clients to be on auto pay. And we can do it via ACH or credit card or whatever it looks like for you and your business. But it just works better for everybody if we just make this be a thing that just is automatic. We hope you understand. And 95% of your clients are gonna be like, no problem, right? They're going to move on and not make an issue out of it. Now, the 5% that do make an issue out of it, I would say that all 5%, all everybody in that 5% isn't necessarily going to be a challenging client to deal with, but that's probably where your challenges are going to come from. Ultimately, if a client isn't paying their bill on time and or they didn't sign for auto pay, they're not paying it on time, and this is this constant over and over and over again type of thing, it might be time for you to eject them as a client as well, right? This is the type of client that if you can turn them around quickly and have it not be a continual issue, cool. But if you can't, it's time for them to go away because they're already not paying you and they're creating you a lot of extra work for not paying and then calling up when they haven't paid and they're on credit hold and then they're pissed off because you can't help them because they're on credit hold. Like it's this continual circle of challenge that is just not really worth dealing with. If you're getting some value out of this video, please do me a favor and hit that like button. It really does help the YouTube algorithm show these videos to more people like you. So then we head into the once bitten, twice shy client, right? This once bitten, twice shy client has had a previous bad experience with another MSP, with another IT provider or IT person, or maybe it was you, right? Maybe you created a problem before and they are still kind of reeling from that, right? There's a number of ways to handle this type of client, so let's talk about those here quick. Now, the first thing is you need to understand who caused the issue in the first place. Was it you or was it somebody else? If it was somebody else, you can talk to the client about, hey, you know what? This was previous regime. We don't do it this way, right? This is our process for handling this. This is how we do this thing. This is the technology that we put in place on your behalf that's going to make this thing not be a problem again, right? Those types of conversations are really important. If it was you and you caused the problem, you need to continually work with them to have them understand that this was a thing we solved for, this is how we solved for it, and all those pieces, right? There's a number of things you can do to kind of keep moving that relationship forward because most clients aren't going to necessarily fire you if you make a mistake. Speaking of making mistakes, the last client I want to talk about today is the legitimately pissed off client. The legitimately pissed off client is pissed off at you for a good reason. You made a mistake, your service has lacked, something happened that didn't go in their direction, and they're pissed off for good reason. This part is tough, and this one requires a little bit more careful steps to solve for. The first step is own the issue. You don't want to hide behind, oh, I didn't realize this was a problem, or you don't want to bury your head in the sand or like ignore it and hope it goes away. Own the issue, understand what's going on, and own it, right? Because I think you should then be transparent about the issue, at least as transparent as you can be, right? Don't go out of your way to throw yourself under the bus, but you want to make sure that you let the client know that, yeah, we made a mistake. We're human. Technology sometimes just doesn't work the way we expect it to. There has been a number of times where, as a technician, I've made mistakes, and certainly as an MSP, I've made mistakes, right? I had a situation where I was unracking a server and I hit the power button of another server, and that server went into shutdown mode, and I didn't realize it right away because I didn't realize I hit the power button. Well, that client was pretty pissed off that, hey, we lost a bunch of servers. They all went down in the middle of the day because, something you did. Yep. I caused that issue. Sorry about that. Moving on. I'm solving for this now. And now we're going to solve it for the future as well, right? You want to be transparent about what happened to cause the issue as best as you can be and own it, right? This is where you need to be real careful with your language, though. You don't want to say things like, we're sorry if you were inconvenienced. You say, we're sorry that we inconvenienced you. This is much like saying to your spouse, I'm sorry that you took this that way, right? You don't want to gaslight your spouse. You don't want to gaslight your clients, right? We caused you a challenge. We caused you a problem. We caused you inconvenience. We are sorry about that, right? Just own it, move on. So the next thing is you solve the problem, right? You have to fix the issue. So for when I hit the power button, I finished unracking the one server quick because I needed to get out of the way, turn the server back on, got everything back up and running, and issue solved, right? And communicated with the partner and made sure that they understood, hey, we took care of the issue. I'm sorry about that. This is what happened. And this is how we're going to make sure it never happens again. Because the next step is fix the process, fix whatever the issue is. So coming out of that situation, We actually went back and we actually flipped all of the servers across all of our clients to say, if you bump the power button, if just about power button press, basically to make sure that it would be basically do nothing. But we flipped them all to do nothing. We owned it with the partner. We let them know what happened. We also said, now we've flipped every server across our entire environment for all of our clients to make sure this doesn't happen again to anybody else either. Client was like, oh, cool, moving on, and it kind of end the story at that point. But once you solve the issue, once you solve it for good, you also want to follow up with the client to make sure that they understand that you took the issue seriously, that you cared about the issue, you worked your way all the way through the whole thing, and this is the outcome. Because, like I said before in the previous section, that most clients aren't going to fire you for making a single mistake. They will fire you for making the same mistake over and over again, or making a lot of mistakes in general. But a single mistake, most people can get past that. So own it, be transparent about it, solve the issue, and solve it forever, and make sure the client is like, yep, we're good to go, right? Like, do those kind of things, and you're going to be in a much better spot. Running an MSP is hard. Making mistakes and having challenges with clients is also hard, right? This is not an easy business to be in. Technology can be fickle. Things don't always go in the manner that we hope them to go in. And it's important that you have some tools in your tool bag to deal with these things when they happen. So work with your clients when they're frustrated, for whatever reason that they're frustrated. Help them move past it, and I think you're going to be in a much better spot. If you'd like to see the video where Brad and I talked about kind of a bunch of legal stuff, I'm going to throw that video up over here. And if you want to see my video about how to deal with challenging employees and challenging techs, I'm going to put the video up here. Thanks for coming on this ramble with me, and I hope to see you on the next one.